everybody, Joe Moore here, Psychedelics Today, joined by Kyle Buller for Solidarity Fridays, September 24th, 2021. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Good, Joe. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. A little groggy, but we're going to make it happen.
I feel the same way. Don't worry.
And today on the show, we want to largely talk about how to get involved in the field. We get a lot of messages about this, and we'll try to dig as deep as we can to help you all figure out your path here. This kind of seems to be our role, helping people figure out their path. All good. I love doing it. Before we jump in, though, announcement about a webinar coming up on Tuesday, the 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern, noon Mountain, 11 Pacific, with Dr. Jerry Brown about a class we're launching with him that'll go on sale on Tuesday. Kyle, what can you tell us about this class?
Yeah, it's called Psychedelics Past, Present, and Future. So this is going to be a hybrid class, kind of like what we do at Navigating Psychedelics. There's going to be 6 pre-recorded videos, and then we'll also have 4 hour-and-a-half sessions live on Zoom. And that begins late October, October 26th. And I think that will be at 2 p.m. Eastern as well. Jerry's over in Europe, Spain, I believe, Portugal, forget. So catering to his time zone as well. And so, yeah, we're going to have this webinar on the next Tuesday, the 28th of September, to kind of go over a little bit of an outline of what the course looks like. And Jerry's going to touch on the 10 psychedelic landmarks, and also kind of a little bit on the topic that we're riffing on today, possible merging careers, how to get involved, and also why understanding, the past and whatnot is applicable to clinicians and therapists. So yeah, it's going to be a great course. I'm really excited about it. We've been working with Jerry for the past few months on it, and I think it's going to be really awesome. So yeah, check out the webinar. Again, that's on on September 28th, and you can check that out if you go to our website, Psychedelics Today, and click on events. There's a little banner in the events tab, Psychedelics Past, Present, and Future. So if you want to learn more, check that out.
All right, perfect. Thanks for that. More education coming down the pipes too. We'll make some more announcements soon on that. Probably new dates for Navigating Psychedelics will get announced soon as well. So do be watching for it if you want to join us. If you're not following us on socials, please do. We're almost everywhere. In our email list, you'll get some great stuff once in a while. So feel free to join up there. All right, let's jump in. So I remember in 2001, 2002, sitting around saying, what? There's psychedelic therapy that's happened, and they had extraordinary results. And this looked like the most real-world magical thing I'd ever heard of. So I said, of course I want this to be my career. What do I do? I talked a lot about going to grad school, figuring out if I should be a therapist, but back then it was not very clear if and when this stuff would ever become legal. Now it's becoming pretty clear that there will be legal access to psychedelics in a medical context, and in the United States and elsewhere in the Western world. And more people are getting excited about this. I'm kind of curious, Kyle, like what kind of stuff are you hearing from folks that want to get involved? Or
people are excited, right? People want to get involved on different levels. I think a lot of people that do want to get involved really kind of want to do either psychedelic assisted therapy, sitting, guiding. A lot of people are interested in the integration aspect of this work, so integration coaching. And yeah, kind of on your point, I mean, when I started out with this interest as well, late 2000s, just trying to figure out how the hell do you get involved in something like this? I remember, I think it was like 2007, 2008, just reading Stan's book, LSD, Doorway to the Numinous, and just being like, I need to pursue a career in this. And, I think back then, the research was happening. And so the only really route I was really considering was something academic, psychology oriented, and therapy oriented. And now there's so many more opportunities that are emerging. And I think that's really exciting. People are getting involved on all sorts of different fronts where, yeah, I guess if you asked me this like 10 years ago, I probably would have said, the route is academia, and go get your psychology degree or a research degree to do this stuff. But the field is really growing, and so now there's a lot of different entry points into this.
Right. I guess there, few things to take into account: your geography, your age, what your current career experience is. Are you able to go get retrained with a new graduate degree or PhD or something like that? People have to find out what's available to them and what do they want to do. So low hanging fruit in the United States seems to be Oregon. We don't know too much about what's going to happen there, but what we do know is that there's really low requirements for becoming a facilitator or guide. A high school degree and the completion of whatever training Oregon decides on. Yeah, I think that's fascinating and a big deal. You will have to live there for 2 years to get the right kind of residency before you can legally do this work. It's to protect the state, so people just don't go there and do the work and kind of take it from the people that live there. Yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on Oregon?
I mean, it does seem like really great opportunity that's, starting to emerge and a way to people to get involved. I think let's backtrack a little bit. And so,
Sure.
When we get emails, we get emails all the time saying, I really want to get involved in the psychedelic space. What opportunities are there? How do I get involved? My first response is, what interests you? What are your interests and what are your skill sets? So really trying to figure that out first. Like, what are you good at? What can you, provide to the psychedelic community? Necessarily doesn't have to be therapy, right? So really, take a pulse on that and do some questioning about, what are you really interested in? What can you provide? What's your skill set? And also, why do you want to get involved in psychedelics? I think that's also important too, to just kind of like have some self-inquiry around that of, did you have a powerful experience you want to give back? Is it just intellectually interesting and that's why you want to get involved? So really start to think about who you are as a person and how you want to show up in this space. And then, dig in and do some research. Just kind of listen to podcasts and start to get familiar with the space, and really kind of know what's out there. So I think those are two good starting points to start to ask yourself questions around what you want to do, how you want to show up in this space. And one of the tips that I typically tell people, and I know it's kind of weird right now with, we've been in lockdown, but, we're out of it now, but, there's still some restrictions here and there on events aren't always happening as much as they used to. One thing that is super important is just getting out there and networking. So, if you want to get involved anyway, go out to an event, go out to a conference. When I started my journey, I had some really profound experiences. I stumbled across Stan's work and some of the other psychedelic elders. And for me, I was like, I really need to just figure out my own process here. That's what started to move me towards transpersonal psychology. It wasn't that this was some sexy thing that I just wanted to get involved in because it felt trendy. It was like, I was really struggling with my own process and I needed to find answers for myself. There's kind of part of it where I was like, I have no idea if psychedelic therapy is actually going to be a thing, how long is this going to take? So for me, it was a very kind of personal journey of like, I need to find some answers for myself. So, that's why I ended up going down the transpersonal psychology route, was just trying to figure out my own process and to just find some comfort in exploring what the hell is going on with these experiences that I had. So what I did was, I found a program, found a bachelor's in transpersonal psychology, and that was really awesome because I got to write a lot about psychedelics. I had, that's where I met the Gibsons and started training in breath work. But I also attended conferences and events. Like any conference and event that popped up during those years, I tried to go to. And, you get out and meet people, right? That's where the conversations happen. You start to learn about what's going on in the space. I think the first psychedelic conference I went to might have been Horizons. I've been to some other events. I think maybe I went
Horizons
to the
was my first.
Yeah, I think that was probably my first event. I went to the DMT Spirit Molecule release. That was in 2010. And I think I stumbled across Horizons after that. But, there I actually made some really great connections. I met Brian and Brett from Symposia, Nathaniel in those early years. And that was really cool to, meet them at a conference. And then only a few months later, they put on their first event in Amherst, Mass. And so, is getting out and meeting people so important. You don't know where some of those connections will take you to. And I just thought about when we started this podcast, we were like, who can we reach out to? And it's like, oh, like I know the guys over at Symposia, like maybe those are good people to reach out to first. So, get out there and network, get out there and meet people, have conversations, see if there's any collaborations. And again, really thinking about what's that skill set that you really want to bring to the community.
Thinking about, what is your itch, and can you develop the thing that can scratch your own itch? I think that's a really big, way to get involved. What can you contribute with no expectation of return that might want people to get involved with you? My path was developing workshops and events all over Boston, conferences all over Boston, then doing the same thing in Boulder and Denver. And, it paid off. It was a good credential, a good feather in my cap. Certainly cost a lot of money and time, but I think it paid off. Some of them are going to be duds. Same thing with some of our podcasts are duds. Like some of our podcasts are stellar though. Right. So, just keep doing. Don't be afraid to critique too much, and see what's there. But let's talk about like more sciencey careers, right? So we have a huge need for all of the following: high-end chemists, kind of production chemists, both in the above ground and underground markets. We need you all. We need psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, social workers. There's a huge need for kind of spiritual emergence retreats that are, we've been talking about this coming wave of spiritual emergence that's going to be quite uncomfortable for a lot of us. So there's a grave need to be watching that closely. What else? Politicians, we need people doing advocacy work at the state level, local level, and also at the federal level, domestically in the US and internationally. Right? Like TheraSil has done an amazing job getting a lot of access in Canada, and other groups have done great work, like SB519 in California. That's going to be a big deal for this movement. What are some organizations that you want to work with? How do you vet that an organization is someone you want to jump in with? I would say if it's a new organization and there's not much press about them, go slowly. Get to know them, maybe have a few meals with them, kind of follow a lot of their writings and whatever they've put out online, just so you get a better sense of who they are and what they might be up to. And, other more established organizations, it's a little easier because a lot of their material's out there. There's been plenty of critiques already. And you kind of know what they're up to. So I'm thinking groups like Drug Policy Alliance, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Transform Drug Policy Alliance, LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, USONA, MAPS, CIIS, Heroic Hearts, VETS. There's so many. There's only like too many organizations to list now. And that's just one way to help on kind of like the non-profit-ish end. And then there's all the businesses that need professionals of all sorts of colors, like accounting, marketing, writing, transcription, being an assistant. Like, how amazing would it be if we had an assistant, Kyle? Dedicated to you and I. That would be a game changer in my world. Like there's so much that needs to be done. If you're an expert in literature, like perhaps you can do courses on psychedelics and literature. Like, let's tease apart valuable lessons from Tom Wolfe's electric Kool-Aid acid test or Hunter Thompson, or, you know, there's so much writing out there that we can do analysis on. I think I'm getting this kind of flood for thinking about who's the older gentleman that made the book Mind Apps? Tom Roberts.
Tom
maybe?
Roberts. Yep.
Yeah, he really interesting stuff there. Like the idea that as soon as you say a different type of consciousness is valid, that opens up a whole new realm of investigation for academics. So like, what does a keto and mescaline look like? What does a keto and psilocybin look like? And then same thing like yoga and XYZ. And, what does literature look like and under these lenses, or film and art? There's just a lot there. And some of it's amazing. Like think about Android Jones, an artist, an amazing artist. He's now, I think, got a stake in Microdose VR. Like you can be an artist and get involved in software. There's so many different things and so many different applications. Like, have you seen these sound beds, Kyle? Like they kind of vibrate sound through you at the same time as you're listening through music, to music.
Sounds really cool.
Interesting. I tried one a while ago at a festival, and it's really neat. Like a lot of speakers just right under my body. So it's like a totally different experience of music. And I wish I remembered the person's name. I think it was Soren, Soren, from Denver. And he was making his own, but there's companies out there kind of doing mass manufacture and startups doing this. And there could be some really interesting implications for, psychedelics and somatic based therapies, given that this is like vibrating your body with music.
Sounds super interesting. Right. Also kind of reminds me of like the Lucia Light and some of those other companies that put out those light therapies.
It's a lot cheaper than the lights, which is cool.
Yeah.
Lights are so crazy money wise. What else is there? There's room for group organizing, just having small integration circles. There's, just so many different avenues, right? Legal, like we need a lot of lawyers here to help us out. Like our social media is okay, but it's certainly lacking. So we could definitely benefit from help there. Trying to think, if we would look internationally, there's plenty of places you can get involved, like Netherlands, Jamaica, Portugal with all drug decrim. I'm sure there's a lot of activity there. Rules in Brazil are quite interesting. Same thing with Peru, Costa Rica. I'm sure there's some other Central American countries that are also really interesting. Isn't it Ecuador that's the only country with a shamanic licensing?
Didn't a student of ours say that? Yeah. I don't know how. Yeah, I think that might be right. I feel like a student of ours in our past class mentioned that.
Yeah. There's definitely a Central American country or South American country that's licensing shamans. I can't really speak to it specifically. I find that fascinating. It's like, okay, you're allowed to be involved in religion, but not all countries are, I guess, as liberal as ours are, religiously speaking, even given the DEA's kind of interference with religious practice. Well, that's a whole nother thing, religion, right? There's priests. There's priests needing help figuring out how to do this stuff. And, priest just being kind of the Christian term, but there's all sorts of other traditions out there that are active. Harm reduction at festivals, like Zendo Project type stuff. Like we might want to wish that Zendo Project is everywhere at every festival, but it's not. It's too small of a project to be at all the festivals. So we need a big ecosystem of these groups.
Yeah, there's been like smaller companies going out and providing that too, right? To smaller events.
Absolutely. Like Dance Safe does some of that. They also manufacture test kits to help keep people safe. I think they have an eye on portable mass spectrometry equipment that they can drive around to different festivals, which would be amazing. Like, imagine if you could cut drug-related hospitalizations at a festival by 90% by offering some of these services. That would be a miracle, right? And I think they saw pretty dramatic numbers when they were doing that on site in the UK. I know mass spec is kind of a general term I use. There's a lot of those things. But, even just like a mass spec or some sort of technician that knows how to use these machines, huge amount of value for our movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's tons of ways to get involved, and something else. Volunteer. I think volunteering is also a really great foot to get in. Just put your foot in the community some way. Volunteer at events, try and volunteer some of your time at different companies if people need help. I know I've done some volunteering in the past for, say, MAPS, and I gladly dedicated my time for about a year helping them out with the integration list, which was really cool. So that's also a great way to kind of start getting involved. So yeah, there's tons of ways to obviously get into the field, and I think, as we've been kind of mentioning here, like find that little niche, what you're good at, what your specialty is, and can you, I guess, niche it down to psychedelics, right? So, yeah, I mean, we always say, man, what kind of psychedelic friendly lawyers are out there? Do we have psychedelic friendly accountants that understand this space? Do we have, X, Y, and Z? And we need people that understand this space, that are showing up with, those like traditional skill sets that, we need to help us out, help us run the company. So doesn't need to be therapy, doesn't need to be research now. There's a lot more opportunity that's coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. This even brings me into new stuff like Neuroscience Pharmacy. Like, how cool is it when we get to talk to pharmacists about psychedelics? It's really interesting and helpful. There's, what is the the stuff Andrew Gallimore does? What is that? Computational neurobiology. I think that's a fascinating thing, like big data in the science, in the software world. I think that's going to really help a lot, incrementally improving our understanding of psychology. Wearables, like all of these devices, like the VR stuff, the neurostim and neurofeedback and various things. And there's abandoned, or what do they call this? Orphan diseases, essentially, or orphan, disorders, like thinking HPPD, for instance. Like, how much work needs to be done on HPPD? Like, I think a bunch. Like, it's kind of crazy. You and I haven't put together a class on this yet, but I think we will eventually.
We have a short class, like an hour-long class, but I think we need to spend more spend more time there. Yeah,
like, and I'm sure there's plenty of other conditions we could be looking at. Like, as soon as I realized that there were a lot of non-psychiatric applications or non-spiritual applications for psychedelics, for instance, treating chronic pain, I was like, oh, okay. Does this mean that we have to revisit our kind of definitions around psychedelics? Are they exclusively non-specific amplifiers of mental or psychic process? And, what's our framing of what is a mental process? Is like hardcore neurological dysfunction considered part of psyche? Like, maybe to a degree, but also in a lot of senses not. Like, it's certainly not the realm that psychiatrists play in. And then what do we do there? Like, is there some other framing we can leverage? By the way, there's an interesting conversation on Twitter the other day, and this is where philosophers fit in, around like, how do we classify psychedelics? Like, what do you call ketamine? Is ketamine a psychedelic? I put out there, we're calling it dissociative anesthetic with some psychedelic properties. And then Ben Sessa called it a clinical psychedelic. And I thought that was actually pretty fair, because it's a great tool to use in clinic.
Well, I guess if you're going back to like that etymology of psychedelic, right. Anything could be psychedelic, right? I mean, if we're using that concept nature of manifesting the mind, manifesting the soul, soul manifesting, like if any experience helps you to like go into that, what was Lenny's etymology of psychedelic? It was like the lore something about the mouth of a fish and the lore catching beauty. I don't know, it's really, really interesting how he broke that down.
Right, because he went like further back, not just
Yeah,
like mind and manifest. It was like where do these words come from in the Greek
yeah,
etymology? And I always find that helpful. And this term is again an abstraction created what in the last 100 years, 150 years or something. I forget
yeah,
when Huxley and who was it, Humphrey Osmond,
yeah,
had those kind of dialogues.
yeah,
Assume it was in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, but who knows? Really, I forget offhand. But they were quite literate on Greek. That's when they actually taught Greek in their schools. They're
yeah,
certainly elite figures, but um, it's just helpful to like look backwards and find those people to help us, understand the past so we can understand the present a little bit more. Um, yeah. But yeah, what even is soul? What even is, this manifesting concept? So this is where kind of philosophers and psychologists could interface a little bit more
yeah,
often to look at this more carefully, which I think is, why we're so interested in this interface between the two.
yeah,
Um, yeah. And, if we look at different traditions, right, like you don't have to be a straight up like CBT based psychiatrist or like therapist. You can take the Jungian route or like other kind of depth routes to develop your kind of path here. It's okay to be syncretic too, like
yeah.
EMDR. Actually, do you offhand know if EMDR is something that non-therapists can study and then practice, or do you have to be a therapist to be trained in it?
I think anybody can take the training, but I'm not 100%
Mm-hmm.
sure about that. You definitely have to look that up.
Right.
Um, yeah.
But it's a helpful
Um,
tool for integration, right?
yeah. I found this thing that Lenny wrote about psychedelic. Wanted to try to find it. So he said, I prefer psychedelic from the ancient Greek word psyche, combined, derived from delta, the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet. Psyche meant breath as a sign of life or spirit. Delta came, among other things, to designate the opening out of the mouth of a river. Delta can also refer to the open mouth of a fish about to seize a lure. I use psychedelic, therefore, is an etymological way to suggest opening of the soul to take the bait of understanding. I use psychedelic not only to describe the class of psychedelics, but also to describe the powerful experience that follows from the use of psychedelic substances such as LSD and psilocybin. Um, find that to be pretty interesting.
Mm, right. And we should, simmer on that for a little bit. Um, it's okay to just sit and reflect. You don't necessarily need to be on acid to reflect, right?
Yeah.
Or I hope you don't. um, so, yeah, just meditating on these things is important and valuable. Even mediators, like we need mediators right now because the movement's becoming quite fractured and in weird and strange ways that are quite new. Probably terrifying to many of us, exciting to many others. Well, terror and excitement go hand in hand often, so makes sense. Um, yeah, and who are these people that can just help us negotiate all this craziness? If somebody has an issue with somebody else in the space, um, and they have some dirt on them, like who's to say you're not going to go to the cops? And like, there's no real agreement here that you're going to go through arbitration or mediation or restorative justice, right? So maybe there should be some sort of soft contract between people in the underground that are like, hey, before we do any kind of get the legal system involved, let's do mediation with like one of these couple firms or just consultants or something. And those people are out there, and a number of them have experience in this world. I'm a little too quick to write people off, maybe, but
Mm,
I just don't think. I think certain people are just not going to rehab. Um, and I've seen this restorative justice thing fall over a few times in
mm,
our space too, right? Like Jimmy refused, and therefore the whole thing fell apart, and there was no next step, and the person
Right.
that was the victim is now abandoned with no next actions. Yeah, it's kind of tough.
Yeah, it really is. Did we touch on like starting a psychedelic club or society? So that's also
That's a great one to talk
another,
about.
yeah, another great
Yeah,
way
like we
to
mentioned, like
get
the
involved.
small integration groups, but I think we should talk about the other stuff. Like, what have you seen so far in this starting clubs?
Well, I know you're on the board of Psychedelic Club, right? So the organization that helps you to start that. But I mean, anybody could do it, right? I mean, you could just create a local meetup event around your area. Maybe there is a topic that you want to focus on, but just getting people together to talk about this topic, and see what you could do as a community. Maybe it's hosting, film viewings, right? Maybe going out and well, Quasi, right? I mean, I remember when I met Quasi at Horizons. I don't
Mm,
remember when that was, but he started the Buffalo Psychedelic Society. I think that's what it was, right? And they had a whole campaign around cleaning up the environment, going on walks and kind of cleaning everything up, and to spread awareness around psychedelics. And so there's a lot of different things that you could do as a community, and I think that's
mhm.
also important, just in general. I'm hosting a group right now on psychedelic integration and like spontaneous spiritual awakenings with Emma Bragdon. And one comment that has really come out is there's just this idea of community. And I think this has been an issue for a lot of people, especially after like really profound experiences, not just psychedelic related, finding people in your local community that you can be involved with, and have some sort of mission together and just find support. So that's also another way to start to get involved here. But I don't know. Do you have any insight there as well, being on the board of Psychedelic Club? And I don't know what they're actually up to, or if they're still doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, there's societies, psychedelic societies, which are usually totally independent. What we've done at Psychedelic Club is we're here to help you get your club rolling, network you with all sorts of other clubs, provide all the materials and frameworks you need to run meetings. Just make it really easy to start your own club. There's no dues really required. It's nice to collect donations and store some locally and store some upstream. I think there's a way to actually make the donations um, tax exempt or whatever, like as a donation to a charity, because it is a nonprofit at the national level. Some of the local clubs also have their own kind of nonprofit status, which is cool. But largely, we just try to make events and collaborations easier. There's like a nice Slack group with people around the world helping, each other for event ideas, structure ideas. Yeah, it's just really, really great to see that kind of stuff. Um, and issues. What have I seen? There's a lot of toxic personalities in the psychedelic space, and people who have done a lot of bad stuff. So, helping steward groups away from people with tough reputations is kind of part of what we do at the leadership.
Mm,
Um, I think only if somebody's got multiple sexual assault type things going or deaths under their belt, that's kind of when we step in. Largely, we don't really, or hospitalizations. Largely, we don't really make much noise around what people do with their clubs. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's also hard. Yeah,
cool. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah, totally.
Um, Yeah, we have an article too up on our website that probably needs to be updated at this point. But I wrote this. When was this? It was one of our early blogs of navigating the psychedelic field, and I'm just kind of going through this right now as well, just for some oversight. Yeah, there's other ways to get involved in research, so that might also be a way to donate some of your time, maybe expertise, or if you are struggling, if you get involved in a clinical trial, that might be helpful. But there's a lot of online surveys and playing your part in that and contributing to science. That might feel really good to fill out a survey and know that you're contributing to some degree. And there's lots of surveys out there that students and graduate students are putting together for their research. So that's also a good way to get involved. Something I think about if you're kind of taking that professional route towards psychedelic therapy, something that I've had to ask myself, and I think I'm having mentors in the space as well. This is a piece of advice that I've given out a few times too. Like, if you want to become a psychedelic therapist, I think the main thing that I always say is, do you see yourself also providing therapy outside of psychedelic use? And if the answer is no, like, maybe there's another route. Like, could you go to like a retreat center, Oregon? Maybe when they get up and rolling, maybe you can just do kind of the sitting aspect. But I think that's an important point too when we're talking about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Really seeing yourself wanting to do therapy without the psychedelic, and how can you really start to develop that skill set, get that training, get extra training. Could you, I think getting training in some of the somatic techniques, Hakomi, somatic experiencing, also internal family systems, getting trauma-informed training. So really developing your clinical expertise is going to be really important. Psychedelics are just the one part of that. So you really want to come in with a strong foundation there with your clinical skills. Because I think it is exciting. People just want to rush right into the psychedelic aspect, but, kind of bypassing some of those foundational skill sets that you really need to do this work. So that's an important reminder. For those that are interested in research in psychology as well, I remember I was chatting with Michael Mithofer at a training years ago, and I was I just started grad school, and I was asking him advice for navigating like a research topic. And something that he mentioned to me was, can you focus on, say if you're a therapist and you want to focus on a mental health disorder, can you focus on a mental health disorder and also really try to find out like a good kind of treatment for that, and then add the psychedelic onto that? And so when I heard him tell me that, like, if you want to say focus on PTSD, what could also be really helpful for understanding and treating PTSD, and then adding the psychedelic on top of it. So I took that and actually ran with that for my capstone paper, and saw breathwork as a potential model there. So how could I create this breathwork framework for PTSD? And then this could also be really applicable to psychedelic work later on, and kind of creating that framework. So I thought that was really helpful advice too, like getting really kind of niched down in that treatment protocol that you want to do. And then adding, the psychedelic on top of it. And, I keep coming back to, these are tools, right? And they're adjunct to a therapy. They can really amplify somebody's therapeutic process. So yeah, really kind of developing that skill set and that foundation is important.
Right. And these lateral jumps, I think, are big. Like, okay, can I translate this over? Is it possible? So like if you did a PhD on IFS, for instance, or ACT or ACE, or some of these like frameworks for working with stuff, probably jump right over. Somatic psychology PhD, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work left to do here. Early days in science, or really, really early days in psychology. And what are the next systems over? Neurology, big deal. Really understanding how nerves are working, brain works related to the body, all really interesting stuff. So really big deals. And they could jump right over into psychedelics, hopefully.
Yeah.
Even traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, like highly relevant.
Body work too. Like I know
Right.
we had folks that were body workers in the class saying, where's my place in this? And I think there's a huge role in body workers and
Yeah.
massage, physical therapy, and psychedelics. Like, I
Hmm.
think there's some really interesting stuff there.
Yeah. Um, absolutely. Yeah. People saying things like, I refuse to get a massage not on psychedelics. Like that's been said to me a number of times,
Interesting.
because that's the only way they've found it to work.
Mm.
Um, and I find that really interesting. What is it about loosening the body, or like the viscera or whatever, that makes a bigger impact like this? Is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my interest in somatics started, well, obviously was from breath work, and we focus on body work there. And I think just me holding a lot of physical trauma from my accident, but it really didn't click until, and I think I shared this on the podcast before, but it didn't click until I was doing some physical therapy, and I was getting some work done on like the scar tissue on my abdomen, stuff like that.
Right.
And I had this huge somatic release, where I started to flash back of being on the stretcher, being pushed through the hospital, and seeing the lights kind of flash by me again. And I remember looking at the physical therapist, and obviously, like, I was doing that double bookkeeping that we do in breath work and breathing into it. And just thinking like, wow, like how powerful would this be if I was in a safer container to really let go? Like, what is my body holding on to right now? And I remember just asking the physical therapist, is like, do people cry? Do people typically have like big emotional releases when you start working with this? And she's like, yeah, sometimes. And I just became so interested in this question of like, what's the potential here if you're trained in understanding somatic
Hmm.
releases on that emotional level? Like, what kind of healing process could unfold there? Because there was something that really wanted to be released and kind of be resolved, but I'm in a physical therapy office, there's other people around, I'm not going to go into screaming and crying and having a full-on release there. But that was a thing of going, whoa, my body is holding on to so much shit that, like, this is fascinating. And to have kind of like that psychedelic flashback, or that
Hmm.
trauma flashback, which thankfully I had that like breathwork training where I'm like, okay, I'm doing double bookkeeping, I'm breathing into this, I'm starting to re-experience this trauma. But yeah, that was the thing that really kind of got me into it. And so thinking about like trauma in the body and adding a psychedelic to it, it's amplifying that emotional state, it's
Yeah.
amplifying any of those inner experiences, and then being able to work with the body to release it even more. I mean, if we talk about like myofascial release, right, like working with the fascia, working like all the emotion is stored in that, in the fascia in the body. So like, yeah, what happens when we combine the two when that's getting amplified? I'm just throwing out some hypothesis here. People can maybe run with it.
If you want a more credentialed, speculative
Yeah,
podcast, the podcast with Will Sew and Devin Christie,
yeah,
fascinating,
yeah.
and really great stuff there. Um, yeah, what is it that can make your nervous system feel good and safe? Massage can help. Human touch, group experience. What about dance? Ketamine and dance, or MDMA and dance, or yeah, what happens when your body feels good all the time? There's really big questions. Something I heard the other day. I've been following this interesting account. I've dealt with chronic pain for a number of years now, as many of you might know. But this group called Stop Chasing Pain,
Mm,
they had an Instagram post yesterday, and they have some really great stuff about lymph systems and all these body systems that play into chronic pain or various kinds of dysfunction. And they said like any body part that you feel shame in kind of goes offline, becomes kind of
yeah.
deactivated due to shame. And like, what does that mean? Like if part of your face or like your belly or your chest or something or your butt or legs, like you start having shame around those, do you start losing, I don't know, your normal athletic abilities to be able to move around in space based on the shame kind of like down regulating or shutting these things
Mm,
off a little bit because you don't want to be aware of it,
right.
right?
That's super interesting. That actually came up in a massage I had, just around the accident stuff. Like, what am I telling that part of my body that's always in pain? And am I shaming it? Am I holding that shame there? Am I holding that disappointment? Am I holding that anger in that part of my body? Answer is yes, most of the time. I'm like, oh, this isn't functioning properly. And what's our relationship to that? Are we constantly beating that part of ourselves up or feeling like shameful around it? And does that have an impact on that pain?
Probably. Yeah. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So like long and short, anybody can get involved in the field. Start going to events, start engaging in, if you're not ready to go to in-person events, it's totally fine. There's plenty of online things available. Watch for gurus. Anybody that tells you their way is the only right way, possibly problematic. I'll probably tell you that, but I'll probably also tell you that I reserve the right to be very wrong and to change my mind. But models should improve over time, and you can contribute to us collectively evolving our models. And what is this relationship long term that we're trying to culture here between psychedelics and the human race? I think there's a lot. Like how do we go ahead and manifest that mindset that might save the world from ecological collapse, re-enable families to be healthy systems again? There's so much here. Clean the rivers, all that. And what did Lenny say at one point? There's plenty of issues out there. You just got to pick a couple or one or two and just really go for it. There's no way any of us as individuals are going to take on every issue out there.
How
Revel a little bit in your limited scope as a mortal primate on Earth.
I was just going to come back to Bucky Fuller, that small local adjustment quote that Lenny always kind of talks about. We're here to make small local adjustments. So what's one small local adjustment in your life that you want to fix, that you want to focus on? And can psychedelics play a part in that? And kind of go from there.
Right. I think the answer is personal for everybody. It's geographically specific too. Like if you live in the Northeast, you're probably not too worried about water conservation, but in Arizona, Colorado, California, Nevada, maybe you should be. Texas probably too, right? Like there's a lot of issues, pick yours. And don't forget about the ones you love too. Like your family and friends need attention also, not just like if you want to be a martyr, give everything up to go help folks in Haiti, cool. But know that you might be causing other people harm by just straight up leaving. So it depends on how long you're going for, right? If you're going for 2 days to 5 weeks, like maybe not that big of a deal. If you're going forever, maybe it is a big deal. And I guess, what does psychedelic education look like? So, obviously this is our main business. We teach everybody from doctors to coaches, from business people to students, people active in the underground, and people that are only interested in above ground work. So we hit a lot of different angles. I know some programs don't really allow for folks in the underground to come, but it seems a little silly given that they've often got decades more experience in this space than above ground folks do. Like who has the most experience right now in the clinical? Totally, exactly. They've been at it for a long time. Like outside of the underground, people with the most experience, probably like Stan Groff and Bill Richards, that are still alive today. Like maybe there's others, but I don't know their names yet. And there's folks in the underground who've been around just as long. And sometimes they show up to our class. So, what do you need to know? Well, you want to know the basics. You want to know harm reduction, how to prep, how to actually run a session, how to land. And then a lot of clinical material. It's kind of like the course outline that we have, right? It's like, here's the theory, practice of it. And then here's a lot of commentary and discussion from people with clinical expertise. We've got some insights from the underground as well mixed in there. And I guess you've got to understand too, there's so many different types of use cases, right? From psychiatric to pain to recreational celebratory. to, I don't know, problem solving. Yeah, spiritual, religious. There's so much here.
Cognitive enhancement, just
Right.
human enhancement in general.
Yeah, betterment of the well. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so many interesting things here. And how do we really discuss them? And what I like to say is your first couple of classes should just be giving you a foundational understanding that'll kind of be a nice scaffold for you to build your own little kind of career path or whatever it is in the space. And without a foundation, how far can you really go, or how high can you really build your building, right?
You need that bi-directional growth. Have a strong foundation, strong root system, then build up.
Exactly. Yeah, strong roots for a strong tree. It's a big deal. So yeah, the more foundational work you do, hopefully the more stable you're going to be in the long run. A lot of people say, come on down. I'll make you a 5-MeO DMT expert in, 2 weeks. And you come back after 2 weeks and maybe you feel like you're an expert. And are you really helping people? It's kind of hard to say. Like, you might actually be harming people. If you're not doing the facilitation right. People have died with 5-MeO DMT. Some people get injured. This whole concept of reactivation with 5-MeO DMT is a little alarming to me. All of a sudden you're back in it days or weeks later, and it's a little scary. Are you doing good informed consent? Are you impacting the environment more than you might want to? There's a lot here, and we get into a lot of that in our programs. Some of the other programs do, but a lot of them just ignore the underground as if it doesn't exist. And that just doesn't seem realistic, because if you're going to be doing integration therapy, you should be aware of what's happening out there.
Yeah. What are your clients doing too, right? Going, these, like, I was just doing some presenting for another organization. And I always think about it because, it's kind of like a clinical audience, and I'm talking about like these different use cases and talking about set and setting and talking about the celebratory use and why that's important for you as a clinician therapist. You need to know about that, right? Because clients are doing it, right? How do you make sense of it if you don't know why people are doing that, or understand some of those basic like harm reduction techniques, tips, keeping your clients safe, educated? I think that's important.
Totally. Yeah, it's a really big deal. And what impact do you want to have? Do you want to, I'd suggest people fight the revolutionary impulse unless they really want to go there, really, really want to go there. Because a lot of folks are coming in saying, okay, these practices that have been around for, anywhere between thousands of years or 2 years, are what are going to change the human psyche and save the planet. So people say this kind of stuff, and I don't totally believe it yet, though I think psychedelics are one of our best options. But coming in, just having that much hope in the molecule or the plant or the animal itself might be a little premature, and we might not be able to say that wholeheartedly yet. Just know that there's limits to what you might be able to say and do, and that treat it, please, like a long game. Just as soon as you get your master's, you're still not an expert. Same thing, get your PhD, you're an expert in a really small slice of this thing. And I think what we're doing is saying, hey, let's at least get a grip on everything that we've seen happening, and then you can pick your kind of subspecialty. It's okay to specialize, just understand it's specifically that. Specialized in one niche, and there's a lot of world left to explore and learn about.
It's funny. Somebody was recording a podcast yesterday for somebody else's podcast, and they were asking me like, what's one thing I guess you've learned by doing this project, and just I guess like being interested in this for so long. And just like what you were saying, like I think my mindset early on was very optimistic. It still is optimistic, but kind of very like heroic of like, this is gonna change everything, to just being involved and doing more critical thinking around it, pulling back and being a little bit more realistic, listening to people that have had really difficult experiences. And we touched on this in the last few episodes around just that idea of healing. Is our traumatic experiences that people have during this always a healing experience? Sometimes yes, it takes time for it to shake out, but just also the weirdness around a lot of this stuff too, and just trying to be really honest around it. Do we really understand it? I think we could sit there and be dogmatic at times and say, yes, we understand what's going on, but do we really? I think the more I've been getting involved in this, I have more questions than answers, and that's also really hard to hear too, right? It's like, hey, where are the answers? Like, I don't know. Psychedelics is just inherently weird at times. And can we be okay with that too?
Right. Well, reality is inherently weird. And, there's a sci-fi writer. I'm always going to forget this person's name, but it's a favorite quote of Terence McKenna. What on earth is it? So, not only is reality, wow, oh man, it's something along the lines of reality being stranger than we can suppose. I think that's the second part of the line. Not only is it weird as hell, but it's stranger than we even have the capability of supposing. So there's something there. Doesn't mean we shouldn't stop investigating. It's just there are going to be limits to primate knowledge. This kind of brain is going to only go so far. So when we're dealing with these really strange frontiers like psychedelics, we should just respect that. The mystery might just keep on going.
Which, I don't know, that adds more magic to it to some degree, right? Like, there's something about the unknown and the mystery that keeps life going and moving forward.
Right. Cool. So I think that's a nice place to wrap. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. You can get involved in the psychedelic space. There's plenty of room for everybody. This is going to be a really, really big space. As things come more online, more states have legal access, more countries have legal access. Things are approved by the FDA. There's going to be room for probably everybody who's listening to this podcast today. And more. So stay tuned, figure out where you want to go, get a nice foundation, and see if you can't make some progress. Yeah.
Wonderful advice. Yeah. It's just starting. It's just really starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're really in the first few minutes of this current wave of psychedelic development. Yeah. All right. So again, we've got this webinar with Dr. Jerry Brown, kind of doing a history course with us. That'll go on sale this upcoming Tuesday, the 28th. And there's also a webinar with Jerry that you can sign up for. It's on our events page. It's on the 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific. Should be a friendly enough time zone for those of you in Europe. Will we record this webinar, Kyle?
It will be recorded, yeah.
Right. So sign up for the webinar if you want to get the recording. We'll make sure it gets to you, even if you can't come. So I think you'll learn something. You'll learn about the class we're launching with Dr. Jerry Brown as well. So
and just a lot of good content that Jerry will be presenting.
Right. As we say regularly, we should be aware of our history. So that we can make better decisions in the future. Yeah. I won't say anything too political beyond that, but let's be aware of where we've come from, and we can be better stewards of where we're heading. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Kyle. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. This is Kyle and Joe signing off. We'll see you again on Tuesday, and I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.